Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Tree Advisory Commission. My name is Tom Romaine. I'm sitting in for the chair. And I'd like to call this meeting of the Tree Advisory Commission to order. So you have your agenda packets in front of you. The first item of business would be to amend the March 7th agenda, which is today.
I'll make a movement to approve the agenda.
You have a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, the motion has been seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, hearing none, we have an approved agenda, and we've had an opportunity to review the January 4th minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of January 4?
I'll make a motion.
You have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. We have old business. Moving on to that. City tree reimbursement programs. Is that you're going to take that,
Yep.
Joe?
Acting chair and commission members, we have not had any tree plantings yet this year, so our current tree reimbursement budget is still sitting at that $7,330. That includes the 2018 budgeted amount of $6,000 plus the 2017 carryover of $1,330.
Any questions for Mr. Stateheim? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Buckthorn removal volunteer program update.
The PUC.
Did you cover the PUC stuff at the
No,
same
that
time?
was
that's-
just the city stuff.
That's me.
Thanks.
So, yep, Derek Nelson, Energy Services Representative, Public Utilities. Also, really, no action considering time of the season we're in. So we still obviously are at the beginning balance of $3,000, which is budgeted for the shade tree program on the public utility side. And just I attached a 5-year kind of beginning balance and what was used in those previous years and a percentage of what was left or what was not left attached to the pamphlet, just for informational purposes. You know, the last few years, the budget has been used pretty good and wisely. We've used pretty much all of it with only, roughly over 5% of the budget remaining in 2016-17. And then the 3 prior years to that, we were over budget, some by quite a bit. But I think 2011 might have been the first year where it was implemented, and so it's kind of just a beginning, figuring out the correct budget to put into that program. So otherwise, yeah, no action yet, but I'm sure it's going to take off soon.
Any questions for Mr. Nelson? Thank you. Okay, moving on, the next item is the Buckthorn removal volunteer program update. And
Acting Chair and Commissioners, I can cover that. We received a report from Alan Van Kira, our volunteer coordinator of the Buckthorn program. I'll read it into the record. Great strides have been made in cleaning out Buckthorn from 16th South to 12th South Street, especially along the recreational trail, the bike trail, and South Market Park. This consisted of giant trees that were removed by a private contractor in partnership with volunteers. The contractor was hired and paid for by the Park and Recreation Department. A significant amount of garlic mustard was found in areas previously inaccessible. Efforts are underway to clean out the Tartarian honeysuckle from Adams Park. This park now has a lovely path, loop trail along the Cottonwood River, beginning and ending in the gravel parking lot near the Cottonwood River in Cottonwood Street Bridge. Thanks to an Eagle Scout, his friends and families, that trail has been blazed and is very nice. Recommend you check it out any time of the year, including now. Removing the honeysuckle without damaging the path is a priority. However, the path has not gone through a spring thaw to see how it fares depending upon flooding. This season's secondary growth will be the efforts along the bicycle trail for buckthorn in that same area from 12 South to 16 South. There are many large trees from 12th South to 7th South, so that will require some larger saws. At least a day has been promised in April by Sentence to Service, but their workforce has been cut in half. District 88 has assisted in further removal of their buckthorn on Payne Street, and buckthorn was removed from the dogwoods along the south side of the 10th South Hill. Respectfully submitted, Ellen Van Cura.
Thank you. I have a question. What is the surface of the trail in Adams Park?
Sand, natural
Sand.
surface. Yeah, it's a natural surface trail, wonderful for hikers, walkers, and fat bikers. Fat tire.
Fat tire bikers.
Yeah, fat tire bikers. Yes, yes. So do check that out. And again, we thank the Boy Scouts for doing that.
And any other questions for Mr. Schmitz? Thank you for stepping in for,
No, I had a question.
Oh,
Who would
sorry.
maintain that trail? Like if there's from river flooding now, would there be?
Park and Recreation Department will be responsible for maintenance in Adams Park. You know, the river always comes up, Cottonwood River, of course, and there may be some logs that need to be moved.
Okay.
I don't think we'll probably have to relocate the route of the Circle Loop Trail, but certainly branches or logs are gonna need to be moved.
Thank you.
And the trail is wide enough to get a bobcat or a tool cat in there, so it should be easily maintained in the future now that the trail has been established well by the scouts.
Thank you.
thank you, Tom. Garlic mustard. Gartner.
Joe Gartner, 1401 South Payne. Yeah, it's time to start thinking about garlic mustard, and it's tough because there are things going on that are going to spread it. There's mowing, there's construction, there's, any bicycling that's off into areas like Adams Park can pick up seeds and take them elsewhere. So I was talking to, is it Ryan? Ryan?
Yes, Ryan Wire,
Yeah.
Facility Maintenance
About,
Supervisor.
trying to spray some of the thicker bunches of garlic mustard, and he suggested one of the possibilities would be Sentence to Serve also. So I'll check and see if they can spare some time. All this invasive stuff, last time I looked at something last night, there's 120 species of invasive things in Minnesota that are traumatic invasives, not just dandelions and stuff like that, but the emerald ash borer level of thing. And there's about 40 invasive terrestrial plants, and garlic mustard's kind of like 10th or 15th on the list. The number one plant is spotted knapweed, which in the West is just horrible. I mean, it's just, you go out to Montana and you'll see these purple areas where there's just nothing but that plant. There's 40 species of animals that include insects, and then 40 species of bacteria, fungus, microbiotic stuff. So anyway, getting back to garlic mustard, I think the goal should be to protect the public parks and trails, and as work is done in those areas, to let the public participate or at least know about it so they can take it home and try to use that knowledge on their own property. The other thing is, like on the bicycle trail, just getting people to recognize it, and when they see it, is to stop and pull it. It's been very well done in other parts of the country, where they've encouraged people to become knowledgeable about what the plant is so they get the right plant, how to remove it, and then what to do with the removed parts. If you leave one plant be, ignore it, 10 years you're going to have acres of it in most situations. So as far as the parks go, the 2 parks, maybe 3, that are badly infested are Adams, and it's the end, let's see, what direction would that be? The north end of the park? Well, the end towards, I guess it's all towards the river, but the end opposite the parking area. And the trail is good from the standpoint that last year we couldn't get in to work on it very well because we had to walk in. So anything we were trying to control, we had to walk in, carry out, and now at least we could, hopefully bag it. Somebody from the city could come and get it or spray it. So we'll see how that works out. Adams Park is bad because it's a floodplain, and it's going to be once floodplains get infested with garlic mustard, it's really hard to do much with them. The other park is South Park. That has a lot of garlic mustard and a lot of Dame's rocket. And it's kind of like, well, we'll try spraying and pulling the garlic mustard and see what happens. But in some of these situations, like South Park, I think there's really got to be a cover planting, and probably some type of native grasses might do well. Because what they've done in areas where there's been bad broadleaf infestations of invasive and noxious plants, they pretty much put a grass cover in, and then they can spray the broadleaves. And then eventually, they can reintroduce some broadleaves. So, and then Nels Park has an edge. That whole edge is got a little bit of garlic mustard in it. And if you look past the edge, there's a huge amount of garlic mustard. And then just this last fall, Ellen alerted me to the infestation at South Market Park. And I went out and sprayed as much as I could last fall. So we'll see when we go back, see how that looks. We're going to have that as a stop on Earth Day on the bike route. We'll stop at Market Park, and I'll be there. I don't believe Ellen will be, but I'll be there, and we'll talk about honeysuckle, garlic mustard, and buckthorn, and give people a chance maybe to look for buckthorn. It gets kind of wet in there, so it depends, how the spring is. Then the long range, the state's invested over $700,000 in biocontrol research for garlic mustard. And the hope is to introduce, they have the insect they want to introduce. It has to be rigorously tested and approved. The problem with garlic mustard is it's related to all the brassicas, the cabbage, broccoli. Trying to think of the canola. So, it's pretty, it's so far they've taken they take one garlic plant and one of the test plants, they put them in a unit, they introduce some adult beetles that feed on roots. There's a whole bunch of insects in Europe that feed on it, but only one has been proven to be a possibility here. And what they do is they let those insects multiply. They'll get in on the garlic mustard, eat it. Then after a while, they take the other plant, they dissect it out, look carefully to see if there's any evidence of that insect affecting that. It gets to be a long process because, all the different species of garlic mustard. And then other plants that have to be tested too. They got that all done, but they're waiting for approval. And they may never get it. But if they do get it, the insect could be released in areas that are heavily infested, and it would probably knock the population down to 10% instead of 100%. Um, the other thing is that over the long range, the plant tends to kind of lose its vigor in populations, 30 years. And then there's a chance that other plants could come in among it. But, so it's a tough thing. I guess I'm going to be at the home show and be available to talk to people and also have some public polls that I'm going to work with on Tom to get some publicity. Last year, bad publicity because there wasn't any. So this year I want to increase that. And I would encourage people in New Ulm to call me if they're interested in that and helping to poll or helping to just find out about garlic mustard. My number is 507-276-8326. I also have a website. It's called thegarlicmustardman.com. So that's it. Any questions?
Oh, I had a question. So you talked about on the bike path, if people would identify it and pull it, could you post little signs and say just informational? This is
Really,
garlic
that's an
mustard.
excellent idea. What places have done is exactly that, not to encourage them necessarily to pull it, but to identify it first, and then once they get good enough at identifying it and they pulled it in other places, then to say, yeah, if you see it on the trail or if you see a single plant somewhere. But if you see 100 or 200 plants, let us know because we need to document that. Usually one plant means there's been one seed dropped. 2 plants, then it starts getting to be, it's been there a while. So I had, on the Cicada bike trail, I had a DNR program where we pulled plants, and we had some people from the cities. And it was really, they were really impressed. We pulled, I think, 12 plants. That's all we did. They said if we would have been in the cities at some of the places they pulled, it's all garlic mustard. And they've been pulling for several years. And, and the whole idea is to get it early instead of, get it late. But we'll see. But that's an excellent idea. Kind of like put your dog poop in the bag, and you're walking the dog, but instead of your dog poop, your garlic mustard in the bag, and then dispose of it properly.
I have a question. How many seeds does one plant produce?
Well, a lot of weeds produce a lot of seeds, but it produces up to about 3,500 seeds. But the difference is between garlic mustard and dandelions or something else. There's something called biotic potential. How many seeds are produced and how many can survive? And with garlic mustard, there's usually about 8 or 10 stalks that come up from a plant, and if there's nothing around them, they fall over. That kind of increases the space they're spreading.
Right.
And the seeds are highly viable, so you'll see just thousands of them germinating, but then there's always a few that don't. But that's the problem, with a lot of weeds, they don't all germinate. There's a few that germinate. But you get this high germination, and of course when they grow up to adult plants, they don't all survive, so they kind of kill themselves off, which is a nice thought. But then they spread out more. And deer, the main reason for garlic mustard is garlic mustard's here. Deer eat the plants around them. They don't eat the garlic mustard. So the higher level of deer populations you have, the more of the other plants are eaten, leaving the garlic mustard. And I forget what I was going to say. Oh, earthworms. Earthworms weren't originally native to this part of the world. They're still coming back from when the glaciers left. And so they do a lot of things. And then the garlic mustard is allotropic, I think it's called. It produces a lot of chemicals, like buckthorn. Buckthorn does the same thing. Produces a lot of chemicals to kill off fungi that are associated with native plants. And so then you have buckthorn, garlic mustard, Dame's rocket, honeysuckle, some nettles, and motherwort, and burdock. They're all buddy plants. I probably missed some like thistle and that too, but, so. The other thing is goats, you know, it wouldn't hurt to, I mean, there's a person in Owatonna and other areas nearby that are using goats to control the undergrowth of woodland areas that have all those plants that I just mentioned, to try to keep them from getting to be a jungle. Because that's not the way some of our woodlands should be. Our woodlands you should see trees with lots of leaves on the ground and not very much shrubbery. And if you don't see leaves on the ground and you see a lot of shrubbery and a lot of green stuff once the snow melts, that green stuff probably, could be garlic mustard. So, anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on to the Minnesota Green Corps.
Okay, I'm Shane Mercer, Minnesota Green Corps member in the Urban Forestry Tract. Thank you, commissioners. So starting off with inventories, I thought I'd give a little update on the current status of the inventory. So to date, there's been 5,199 trees in the inventories for city-owned land and boulevard inventory. On city-owned land, there's 2,196 trees in the inventory, and on the boulevard inventory, there's 3,003 trees. The top 5 species are maple with 31.4%, ash 23.3%, basswood 8.8%, spruce 5.1%, and oak with 3.9%.
Have you broken down the maple by species?
No, I don't have that. But I'll try to have that for the next meeting.
I'm just wondering how much
yeah.
is silver maple and how much is other species of maple?
I'm not sure. Now, so with combined with the south inventory that was kind of going around last year, which had 2,823 trees in the south inventory. Those combined makes 8,032 trees. So the top 5, putting those together, are maple with 27.3%, ash 21.5%, spruce 7.2%, basswood 7%, and oaks at 5%. So pretty similar between the, putting those two together. I'm not sure how many people had responded exactly, but I'm thinking it was about around 300 between online and paper. So I thought that was a good response. And the second thing I'd like to talk about with the on this section is a switch to a boulevard tree survey. After the last meeting, kind of thinking about what I'm able to get done in my time here. My last day is, I think, August 13th or 14th. So I think to get some better information quickly, it would be better to go with a boulevard tree inventory, or a survey rather. And so to get those numbers a lot sooner. The survey method that would be used for this is described in the University of Minnesota's Community Engagement Tree Inventory Manual. So it's the same guide that was used during the volunteer inventory session, except we really used the part with the random sampling. And so, you can see the details on that on page 7 of the packet. And so the survey is a 2-part process. there is a pre-sample and a sample section. The city is divided into zones and zone segments based on whether they're more rectilinear, traditional blocks, or curvilinear streets, cul-de-sacs, kind of more winding streets. And so the pre-sample, what happened there is only it only counts trees right now. The idea is to estimate the total number of trees in the segments and ultimately come up with an estimate for the number of trees in the whole city. And so it aims to capture a random 20% of the city ultimately. And so from there, with the sample section, based on that estimate in the pre-sample, you can then assign weights to the zoned segments. And through a calculations, you can determine the number of blocks that you need to randomly sample. By the end of the sampling section, there will be 2,300 trees sampled. That's kind of the number that gives this statistical significance. And so planning for the pre-sampling part of this had been completed, so I'm pretty set to go on that. I do have a map on page 14 that kind of shows the layout for this. Yes. So you can kind of see the different colors correspond to the different zone segments. The city as a whole is divided between downtown, rectilinear area, and the curvilinear area, which is mostly on the outskirts, the newer parts of town. And so all of those kind of little blue and orange lines are, similar distance sampling segments within each of those zone segments. So those are the things that, but once I am out there doing the pre-sample, I'll be just counting the trees within those spaces. And so, that's, this planning is set, and I think with some better weather now, I'll be out there pretty soon to start this. And so,
Can I ask a question? So instead of doing the survey that we were doing last year, you would move to this system? And then when you go out and you count trees, would you be measuring like we did, or are you just counting and identifying trees?
yes, in the second portion, the sampling portion, yes, we'd be doing exactly the same thing as with the inventory with volunteers.
Oh,
But just that it would be kind of random portions of the city. So it'd be the same data collection sheet, the same process. But in the pre-sample, I'm just counting trees. I'm not measuring them or identifying them or anything like that.
So I'll interject a little bit here, acting chair members and advisors. What has been taking place in the past is an inventory. We've actually been inventorying details of the trees and so on, and the various attributes of those trees. Now we're proposing to move to a sample survey. So this is a scientifically statistical valid survey sampling of the community. We're not going to be inventorying every single tree around the community or the boulevards. We're doing a statistically valid sample of the boulevard trees. So that can be done much quicker than a complete inventory would take. And then with that sample survey information, you'll have the data to say, okay, we've got this percentage of trees in this this probable number of trees in various species. So that's what we've been thinking about moving towards over the past month or more. That Shane's time is quite limited here, and we know that we can get the sampling survey complete as opposed to not completing a full inventory. We've also met with the engineering department and others, and there will be a system eventually to, get this into a computer database and the municipal GIS system. So we'll have a tree layer. And so all of this data that's been collected in the inventory and the survey through volunteer efforts like yours and staff efforts will be included in a GIS inventory with the city engineering department and other places. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that we're proposing to shift from an inventory to a survey, and see if you had any questions about that.
So we'll still know, like, we'll still get percentage numbers of how many maple, how many oak, elm.
Yes, yes. You'll be looking at species, definitely, condition, the diameter, canopy, width. Yeah, very same attribute that we were looking at before. So once this survey is completed, from the same talk between like Tom and engineering, they agreed that continuing with the inventory is something important. It's going to be put to use. So once the survey is done, I will just continue with the boulevard tree inventory until my time is up here. That's what I have for the first section
Are
here.
there any other questions on the inventory system? Regardless of whether you count every tree or whether you sample, it's still an inventory.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, I was, one of my first questions to Shane when we had the training was, what kind of sampling are we going to be doing on the boulevards? Because I thought with 20 volunteers, it was not going to be something we could get done in 2 years, to count every single tree on all the boulevards in New Ulm. I think it's a good idea, what you're pushing, so. Comments or questions? Okay. I think we're probably fairly limited on tree plantings this time of the year.
Yeah. But we do, with Park and Rec, we are planning on doing some planting in the future, kind of like looking into this. We are focused on filling in the firebrick forest. So spaces, a few sections along the bike trail in between 12th North Street and 22nd North Street. I have that, a few maps, starting on page
15, 16, and 17
Yep.
in your packet.
Yeah, so Mark Snowbrick and I, Mark, part-time tree consultant. This last fall, we went and walked along the bike trail, kind of checking out what the condition of the trees were that were there, and other spaces that where we could put some trees there. And we came up with a species list where we have a mix of 10 different species, and as it stands right now, the plan called for 89 trees along these 3 sections. Although this will probably change in the future with availability and I guess with further planning on this. That's all I have on for
Okay,
that
any
one. If
questions
there are
on
any
the tree
questions.
plantings? I have a concern. I've
Okay.
been involved in some of the inventory, and trees on public land and boulevards in New Ulm public land tends to suffer from a lack of tree care following the initial planting, in terms of staking, controlling weed competition, and preventing damage from mowing devices. So yeah, I think we need to stress post-planting care, otherwise we take the money that we spent on tree planting and in essence waste it. And the classic example to me is the Shell's firebrick forest and the demise of that completely. So other than making that comment, I think tree planting is a wonderful idea, but if we don't care for the trees we plant, we're wasting money planting trees.
No, absolutely. Thank you. The next item on my list here is the EAB plan. I did the draft. I did include this in the packet, and that is page. What is this?
Could
Oh,
you
18.
highlight the changes from the original EAB plan?
What's that?
You showed us a plan before, right? I mean, there was an EAB plan for New Ulm, and then this was a revision of it, as I understand.
Yes, I did. I think in June last year, June or July meeting, I did include one in the packet, and so it does follow some similar themes and approach, but it definitely expanded on that. And I hope that it's more, easily accessible and include more actions that the city could take. Correct.
So that begins on page 18 of the packet, and it's quite a number of pages.
So I guess we could
Yep.
kind of review this. So I guess starting out with the purpose of this plan is to, kind of what's contained in this purpose is that there's information on EAB, history is provided. It highlights the role of different stakeholders, mainly citizens and the municipality, and just make the point that the division of responsibility between them impacts the management approaches, or the approach and action taken. The promoted approach in the plan centered on pest suppression to mitigate the impact of the emerald ash borer while preserving the benefits of the community's ash tree population. And so in section 2 here, emerald ash borer information, there is a history of EAB in North America and Minnesota. In North America, it was first discovered in 2002 in the Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario area, and in Minnesota in 2009 in St. Paul. And so one thing I would point out right now, and will be a future edit, is that the numbering is a bit off. Right here, you'll kind of notice in section 2, there's section 3.1. It should be 2.1. That an edit that I made already, and that'll be included in the future. Just wanted to make you aware of that. And so there, section 2.2 is a description of the emerald ash borer's biology and life cycle. And I do have a figure on this page that kind of helps understand and simplify things. Section 2.3, the infestation timeline and response. There's a general pattern of an EAB infestation that it starts out slow with little indication of EAB presence, but then, it'll kind of lead to an abrupt increase as EAB population translates, and then finally followed by a decline as EAB either moved elsewhere or the population declines after losing its food source in the area. And so ash mortality, shown in Figure 2 on page 22 of this agenda packet, shows what the ash mortality is like from EAB. And it very closely follows the EAB growth. And so early responses to EAB tried to eliminate the food source for the pest and contain its growth. However, this failed because just a lack of information of the full extent and spread of EAB. They tried to remove the food source around the area of known infestation, but by the time they did that, it had already moved on to other locations, and so it can very easily become out of control and just kind of out of sight. And so the promoted approach now is to try to, mitigate the impact and to slow the progression of ash mortality. And so the Section 3 is the preparedness plan for Nulm. Beginning with 3.1, objective and current conditions. The core assumption of this plan is that all of the ash in the area will succumb to EAB unless action is taken to preserve them, some of them. Some lingering ash have been found, but their numbers are very few. Research is ongoing to determine, what's going on with the lingering ash. But there does seem to be a number of factors, so not just one single thing, one reason why these ash have been left behind. And so management for the community trees is divided between the city government and citizens. And so it's included in here the sections of the city code that kind of lay that out and discuss that. And then the Tree Advisory Commission Boulevard Tree and Shrub Policy also contains more information on responsibilities for private or boulevard trees. So the city is responsible for trees on city-owned land, and citizens are responsible for private trees and the maintenance of boulevard trees within the city. And this plan assumes that this will stay the same throughout the course of an infestation. So moving on, there's 3.2 is concerned with preemptive measures. I would say Section 3 is divided between preemptive measures, things that the city can do beforehand, and things that the city can do and approach to managing AB after it has come. And so the preemptive measures, that there are kind of three main things that the city could do within this plan to prepare for EAB coming around. First, restricting further addition to the current ash population, removing trees in poor condition or potentially hazardous, and applying best management practices, current best management practices, to sustain the condition of the remaining population. And so I had this broken down into these three subsections here, restricting the more addition to ash population, removing trees in poor condition, and applying best management practices. And so with restricting growth in section 3.2.1, the city has a number of reimbursement programs to support the planting of other ash trees. The city no longer plants any ash trees in projects or on city land. And also having a permit for tree activities or planting trees also helps the city to kind of control those numbers. But I do highlight one thing in the plan that the city could consider that I mentioned at the last meeting, was just adding the 3 species of ash, black, white, and green ash, to the list of prohibited species for landscaping plans. So now write ban on ash in the city, but just in landscaping plans. And so that is in section 9.21, subdivision 6 of the city code. And so section 3.2.2, removing poor quality trees, the inventory can help with that. And the city should also encourage property owners to inspect their trees and contact engineering for further assistance on that. And so this, removing these trees, it's not only good for public safety, but also reducing the cost later on, and just ensuring that money spent on future plantings is it's preserved for the long term. And then the third section here on sustaining the population. You just want to maintain, the remaining good quality ash trees that the city owns, and that city departments should check out the trees that they're responsible for, and then also review their best management practices to make sure that everything that they're doing is up to date, and that everyone knows, the proper, practices for what the department usually handles. So the next part of this is EAB management. So what could the city do when EAB gets here? So the aim of management is twofold. First, to reduce the overall cost and flatten the peak infestation cost. And secondly, to preserve the quality of ash trees and to retain their net benefits over time. And so to do this, the SLAM approach is promoted as the approach to take for this. So SLAM is an acronym for slowing ash mortality. So it integrates different activities for pest suppression. There is a section on here on insecticide use. Insecticide use is a very big part of this SLAM approach, and it had been found to be effective in individual trees, and can be a more favorable option than just removing all of the trees at once and replacing all of them. And so this is kind of divided up into a few subsections. So the first one being a more of a description of what the SLAM approach is all about. And so there is 6 components to this. There's EAB survey, And so just trying to get the initial understanding of the EAB presence and its expanse over time. Having an ash inventory that is continuously updated. Suppression tactics that can take direct and indirect form, using insecticides at proper times, and then also using girdled ash trees for trap trees to use kind of strategically to reduce pest pressure in areas where it's increased quite a bit. Regulatory efforts, there will be a quarantine will be established once EAB is found in New Ulm or within Brown County. So that would apply for the whole county. And, there might be other ways to utilize ash wood, and that should be encouraged through regulation. Public outreach, ensuring that people are up to date, that people are communicating on the infestation as it's happening over time, and ensuring communication between city departments and citizens. And then finally, the sixth component here, evaluation, using that inventory to continue with monitoring and making sure that the insecticides and this approach is having the desired effect. And so the effectiveness of all of this is definitely going to depend on the timeliness of it. And then this approach should be implemented. It really just it depends. Earlier in this plan, there's a little discussion about a triggering event. Whether that be a certain distance away from New Ulm, 10, 15 miles or something, or within the next county, to where then the city will take a more active response and, begin inspecting trees, begin, informing citizens that it's EAB is very close and that they should begin taking action, inspecting their trees, and deciding what they're going to do when that time comes. And so the next part on this, 4.3.3, this subsection, so it's SLAM in New Ulm. So there's two phases, and there is a figure that kind of shows, what this is like. There is an aggressive phase, kind of beginning at the cusp, when the population just begins to surge, all the way until you kind of get to the peak stage, when you would expect that most of the ash trees would be gone. And then there's also the second phase, that is the maintenance phase, where management can kind of be relaxed, and insecticide use can be relaxed. And so I kind of divide this subsection up between city-owned land and privately owned land. So for city-owned land, the objectives here are to identify high and medium quality ash, in order to preserve them, and then also identifying low quality ash trees and deciding whether or not they would like to use them for a pest suppression efforts at trap trees or for surveying. And so for private land, as I've kind of been saying before, the city can take an indirect role here with communicating to people and educating. People should be aware of how to identify EAB, signs on ash trees that EAB is present, and then also to know who to contact. The engineering department would be the primary contact for an EB infestation. And so that with that kind of concludes the plan. After that, I have other supplementary material about EAB identification, symptoms on ash trees, pesticide use, and quarantine. So all of that is available in this packet.
You spoke of a triggering event. I looked at some of the recommendations for when it's cost effective to treat ash trees to prevent the borer infestation or to kill the larvae inside the tree, and they talk about it's only cost effective when the infestation itself is within 10 miles or so of the tree. So that might be one way to look at a triggering action. You and I had spoken earlier about the cost of removing a tree. Were you able to do any research on that?
The numbers that have been used in the research I've found have been between $3 and $5 per inch of diameter.
That seems very
And so
low.
I do have, huh?
I said, that seems to be very low.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what that could be in this area. The sources that I have for information are from surveys that were done for in Midwest states, and so it could definitely be different here. I'm not sure at this point what the exact cost would be for that.
We're planning to conduct a survey of our local tree services, asking for some rates, prices for different volumes of ash removal.
Yeah, but I do have some ash statistics with me that I was able to obtain from the inventory. And so, from the from just the inventories for city-owned land and boulevard tree inventories, there are 1,209 ash trees. And so with this plan, I'm assuming that the city would maintain the trees on city-owned land. And so there's 344 ash trees in the inventory currently. To remove all 344 trees, I was able to get based on costs in these resources, to remove and replace trees, they use kind of a conservative estimate of $818 for. So that's removal, everything included in there, labor, materials, equipment, plus replanting a new tree. So that'd be less than 2.4 inches in diameter, and so that includes procuring the tree planting labor with that. And so to remove all 344 trees, I got $281,392 for all of those, and to treat the trees, all of the same ones for 1 year, $18,000.
Well, treatment is just a postponement of the inevitable. So
It does,
if we have
yeah.
high-value trees that we want to save so that we can replace them with something else, treatment makes sense. If we're just going to let the emerald ash borer eat the trees, then it doesn't make sense to do a lot of preventive work or pesticide work. Are you looking for an action on this from the advisory committee?
Acting chair and members, what we're looking for is you to review this along individually and with the advisors over the next 2 months in hopes that you would finalize the plan at our next meeting in May, forwarding it on to the city council for adoption. Our goal is that the council adopt this plan prior to Shane's conclusion of his second year here. Another possibility we spoke about today is a work session. Do we want to have one or more work sessions to go through this in more detail and more, more comprehensively? Or do you want to review it individually and submit comments? But that's our timeline, is to
Okay.
finalize it in May and forward it on to the city council. If it takes longer than that, it would be our next meeting in July, and that would be the latest we'd like to finalize it.
My sense of this is that a work session or two would be probably the best way to do this, but from the attendance that we get at tree commission meetings, I'm not sure how many people would show up. And where we get enough people at a meeting to do it. So I would recommend a work session or two where we could all sit around.
I would agree with that, because I have many questions, and I don't know if here's the time and place for that. Just how the policy would carry out, especially having to do with the boulevard trees, since they're considered the responsibility of the homeowner, but yet now your tree has emerald ash borer in it, so it's just up to the homeowner to make a decision and pay for that removal, or how, those are the kinds of questions I have. And then also, I'm really into the idea of replacing what's lost, not that we become a bare city, and just thinking, how can we encourage citizens to replace these trees, especially the boulevard trees. So I'd have a lot of questions, so I would like a work session too, even if it would be just for 2 hours.
I think what would be helpful to me is there any historical information on how the city dealt with Dutch elm disease?
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be something that we could perhaps model some of our response to emerald ash borer based on what
Yeah.
was done.
So we'll survey the you 5 commissioners on dates and time options, and then try to format it in a manner that staff is able to attend also, and it's a public meeting too, so we'll promote it as a public.
Yes, does it have to be a public meeting?
My understanding would be yes.
Okay.
I'll double check on that.
That could make it more interesting.
I would hope we could have a work session just so we would understand it. And it seems like at the time it's presented to the tree commission at the next meeting, that would be the time public could come and have input and ask questions. For us to understand it and make a recommendation, it's hard to do that with everyone.
Well, as I understand the public meeting laws, other
Right.
entities that I work on are bound by statutes, as if you're going to discuss public business and there's a couple of you discussing public business, then it needs to be a public meeting.
Right.
But also, though, can't you have a work session to try to understand and learn? And it's not really
I
a
would
public
hope
meeting,
so.
it would be just a learning session, because frankly, I don't know a lot about this.
Would be a
And how
good-
can I learn if I don't have an opportunity to hear from other people? I mean, we wouldn't be voting on anything, it would be a learning session, which would be presented at the next meeting that we have before the tree commission, where the public is always invited.
Might be a good question to the city attorney is, can we hold a work session? Or does it have to be a public meeting when we hold our work session?
Well, citizens are able to attend a work session. There's no business to be conducted, and we are a public entity, and they certainly can
Okay.
come, watch, listen, and share if appropriate at a work session. I think it's nothing to be concerned about. So we'll work on trying to get that together over the next few weeks.
And if, it would behoove us as members of the commission to review the emerald ash borer plan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now I think we're
Let's,
on E number 4.
Yep. We're down to Minnesota Green Corps application for this service year.
Yes, and I'll lead the discussion on this, members. Now is the time to make a decision. The application deadline is 5 PM on Friday, March 23rd, to get applications into the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Green Corps office for the 2018-2019 service year. They have made some changes. You have in the packet 3 groups of documents. You have the host site application for 1819. And then the next section, you have the host site application guide for 1819. And then the third section for this is last year's application. You have what we put in last year's application. Now, the big news is that Green Corps has combined some tracks, some emphasis, focus areas. And in what we're working with, they have combined urban forestry with stormwater control, stormwater management. And so if we choose to apply for urban forestry track, we need to have some, one or more components of the 11-month year geared towards stormwater. I have visited with the engineering department, and they certainly have stormwater projects and programs to work on, but they're not in a position to take a leadership role in the application or being a host site supervisor next year. I am willing to be a host site supervisor again next year, as I have the past 2 years, but I am not in a position to make application. If we want to make application, first of all, you need to vote on that and send it to the city council for authorization to apply. And then we need to have one or more people complete the application and have it approved by staff. So that would be one or more commissioners working with probably Mark Schnobrick, our consultant, as he's been very involved in the last 2 applications. So first of all, let's have a little discussion. Do you think we should apply for urban forestry and stormwater in 1819? Or do you think we should not apply in 1819?
I would entertain a motion that we apply for the 2018-2019 program year, so.
And I would second that. I think it's been
Well,
valuable.
I'm the chair, I really shouldn't be making motions, so.
Oh, all right. Then I will make a motion that we make application to the Green Corps.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so is there any, this motion's been made and seconded, is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion?
No.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, so then I will forward this on to the city council for their requesting them to authorize the application. And then we will need one or more tree commissioners willing to commit to completing the application, along with any,
So when is this due now?
Friday the 23rd. Friday, March 23rd, so that is
Well, I
what, 2
will be out of
weeks from
town a good
Friday.
share of the next 2 weeks.
Mhm.
When is the next city council meeting?
It is the third Tuesday, so that would be the 20th. So, I mean, what I would recommend is that
You fill out the application.
you
and-
start working on the
Pending
application
approval.
tomorrow. And then the council, I would anticipate, would authorize that on the 20th, Tuesday the 20th. And then it's simply a matter of me emailing that into St. Paul sometime, before Friday, 5 PM on the 23rd.
Can you contact Mr. Snowbrook?
Yes, yes, and then we'll follow up with you 5 commissioners to see how many of you are willing to assist with the application. In the meantime, I suggest you get familiar with the application, especially, you know, how we might frame some things in the stormwater management section, and that we can, you know, work with the engineering department for some input from them, even though they will not be the host site supervisor. That would end up being myself. All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, we're down to Arbor Day.
I don't think we have anything to add. Shane, do you have anything to add about Arbor Day? It's an annual park and rec program in German Park, and we will be promoting that as it nears in April. So no action necessary at this
Okay.
point.
Utility bill stuffer mailing flyer.
Well, I hope everybody received it.
Yep.
Okay, good. That's the first, that's the most important part. So we ordered, I believe it was 7,000 that we ordered, enough to cover everyone to get one utility bill, and extras for, that'll probably be handed out at the home show, at your booth. And the cost, I believe, was roughly $280 or so, if I'm not mistaken. As soon as I got that bill, I sent it straight to Tom. he handled paying for it, and that's really all there is to say about it. Pretty easy task. All the information that was given to me was given in a very timely manner from Mr. Gardner to Jeff Anderson in the engineering department. So MLC did the printing, and they got it completed about less than a week from when I gave them the PDFs of what I had. So turned out good, I think.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Big tree contest. Do we need any discussion on that right now?
I don't think so. We'll begin promoting that, and then at some point, we'll need a small committee to go out and do the measuring. No action necessary.
Okay. Home show.
We're looking for people to help staff the booth.
Guys should be available part of that time. The plans to be out of town on weekends, so,
We'll be sending out an email to everyone shortly
okay.
requesting some time slots.
It would be a good time to talk to people about Emerald Ashmore.
Yes.
New business. Is there any new business to come before the commission? Okay, hearing none. The next meeting is May 3rd, 2018 at 4 p.m. in the City Hall Council Chambers. And I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
And I'll second.
Okay, we are adjourned.